Good evening, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. It is that glorious hour after dinner when the sunshine is just perfect and backlights the plants and makes them look like they're glowing. Everything is kind of winding down after the long day. It's a quiet, peaceful time in the garden, and I love to come and sit out here and enjoy the oasis that I have created. Now, if you were to ask me first thing in the morning when I get up and it's early and the songbirds are out singing and courting and it's quiet in the neighborhood, I would probably tell you that is my favorite time of day in the garden. And if you asked me in the middle of the afternoon when the bees are super active, the flowers are turning their faces to the sunshine, and my ducks are splashing in the pond, I would probably tell you that is my favorite time of day in the garden. But right now, as I'm sitting here in the evening, this is my favorite time of day. This is when my garden is just speaking to me and replenishing me after a long day. Now I'm out here not only to decompress and kind of touch base with my plants and touch base with myself and kind of check in with myself. I'm out here celebrating because we've had some good news. I'm having a glass of gin and listening to my chickens. That's Violet. If you have heard some of my other videos, she is my loudest chicken and my oldest chicken. So I'm just sitting out here kind of decompressing. Long day, but a good day. Watching the bees visiting the flowers here before they go in for the evening. Listening to the sparrows and chickadees and Violet. And I thought, this is a good time to talk about what I do with my time in early May in the garden, besides just chill out. So, hello Violet. There are 2 points in the year where I take space that I have and energy that I have and time that I have, and I do some strategic planning for the garden. One of those times is in late winter, seed catalog time, when it is gray and so muddy and it gets dark at 4:30 and I'm daydreaming about flowers and bees buzzing and green things, and I'm so sick of the mud. That's when I do some strategic planning. What are my hopes for the garden year? What are my hopes for 5 years from now? Where do I see the garden going? What do I want to be doing with it? I know a lot of people use that time to thumb through their garden journals from the previous year. I don't keep a garden journal. I keep I joke about it as my Sherlock Holmes mind palace, but I only have space for plants in it. And I take a lot of photos and I go back through those. So I go back through my mental notebook and I go through my photos from the past year, and I think about what worked well, what didn't work well, what needs some tweaking for the upcoming year, what needs tweaking for the long term, what can I do to build abundance and resilience in my garden and increase beauty and productivity. Not that much of a surprise. I think a lot of people utilize late winter in the same way. The other time of year that I do that is right now. So when I'm sitting here in the evening, when I'm walking my garden early in the morning and in the evening before I lock up the chickens and ducks, I am spending energy planning and strategizing and observing. There are 2 reasons that this makes a great period in the year to be doing that. As I said, it's a period of kind of downtime, akin to that period in January. So right now, the early season garden chores are done. So beans are planted, peas are already up, my late winter pruning is done. Most of my fruit trees, except for my medlar, are done flowering and have set fruit. So I've started anything I'm gonna start from seed for the most part, like tomatillos or Cape gooseberries. But it's too early for other chores, like too early to put tomatoes in the garden. I've got another 10 days or so until it's time to do that. It's too early to start summer squash and winter squash in the ground from seed. So I've got this space and this breather where I might as well sit and observe and follow the permaculture principle of observe and interact, and use that observation to do some forecasting and planning for the future. The second reason this makes a great time of year to be doing that kind of work is because everything is already up in the garden for the most part. So when I'm doing my January planning and my January strategizing, I'm having to rely again on that mental catalog, right? On that mental picture of what my garden is like and any photos and notes I've taken. But in May, I can walk the garden. The trees are no longer dormant. They've leafed out, they've flowered. I can see where they're shading things. Perennials are up and going. And I can get a much better visual image of what's going on and where there is space left in the garden. So for me, that makes it an ideal time. Those annuals are already popping up and I can see where they're going to be volunteering. Pause here and see if my neighbor's dogs quit barking. Okay, so where were we? I think if I wait for quiet in the garden, I'm never going to get this video finished. So that's just the reality of living in the city and having neighbors. There may be background noise in this video. So as I was saying, taking this time in early May when I have a space where I don't have as many garden chores and I have that visual roadmap. I have plants coming up in the garden. I can see where the sun is coming in. It's rainy in spring. I can watch where the water is flowing and I can make more strategic and more appropriate choices for my garden for the coming season than maybe I could have when I was all, in my head and looking through photos in the winter. So I want to say here, when you're taking time to strategize, be it in late winter or be it right now in this gap in early May, give yourself permission to dream really big, to think, what would I do if I had no limitations on my garden and where would I take it and what would be best for my system? And then give yourself permission to say, maybe time and energy and money are all limiting factors in my permaculture, in my cottage gardening, in my flower borders, in my veggie garden patch, in my orchard. And that's okay. And I think that out of that, working together to balance the daydream and the reality, you can come up with some really good plans. When you think about removing your limits, then you're able to think about what you can do to push your limits and what you can do to push your system toward resilience. So for me, that's a really useful exercise this time of year. And another thing I would encourage you to do at this time of year is to say, where have I gone too far? Because I have that all the time. I get overzealous and overeager and I put in things I don't really have space for or that don't really thrive in my system. Just because, well, one, I like to experiment, but two, I want it all. And the reality is we need to work within the confines of our system. So sometimes for me, this time in May is when I'm starting to see, oh goodness, this area over here is too crowded. I've put in way too much here and I need to take something out. Or I'm gonna end up with overcrowding and then I'll end up with mildew issues or shading and things won't be thriving. So early May is a time when you can definitely do that, and you might not be able to in late winter, but now you can see I've overextended myself here and I'm setting myself up for something other than success. And so when you're taking that time in early May, while we have this space and we're able to use it to observe and improve our systems and make some long range and short range planning, think about that. Think about removing your limits and then think about where you've gone beyond your limits and use all of that observation and information that you collect to tweak and change your system to bring it into balance and the highest productivity possible. So I'm going to sit back here and just show you a little bit of some of the things I've noticed the last couple of evenings in the garden that maybe I need to be paying attention to, that maybe I wasn't thinking about in January, but I'm noticing now in the garden, and where I might want to be applying changes, or maybe I want to be keeping things the same. Maybe I'm going to look at my spaces in my garden and say, dang girl, you're doing really well. Like this is you're doing a good job of, shepherding and looking out for your garden and letting your system come into its own, all on its own. And you don't need to touch anything, and you don't need to do anything. So all of those are realities that may come into play here at this time in May. So let me show you around, and then I'll come back and we'll touch base one more time. So right off the bat, all I've done is flip the camera around from where I was sitting. And I've got a great view of my garden beds, which I just put a ton of leaf mold in. And here you can see I've built up the beds extra deep. This time of year, I can see where my volunteer annuals are gonna come up, all my self-sowing volunteers. I can see where my overwintered things have kind of broken out of their dormancy and are doing great. That is an overwintered calendula. They overwinter well here. And I can see where the holes are. And I do a lot of letting the garden decide where it wants those self-sowing annuals to thrive and just putting up with them. So I can look at my holes and my spaces and figure out, maybe I do have room to grow a couple more zucchini than I thought. Maybe I do have room to add another row or two of bush beans. But maybe I look at my garden and I think, oh goodness, maybe I bought too much winter squash. Where am I gonna put it all? So looking at my annual veg beds, I'm just kind of looking at spaces and where things are filling out and where there might be gaps that I can add to this season. I also look at long-term things like, again, it's very moist this time of year. There's a lot of rain. I'm looking at whether any places are boggy, any places are holding water too long, or any places look dry and like they're missing the rain, they're missing the water. I want to check that out now before I get into the height of summer. So I just kind of scan my annual beds, take an assessment, see what I can change this season. So this time of year also gives me a chance to look at my U-shaped orchard around the edges of the property, okay? This is a good time to do an assessment about where things are getting overgrown. I've done winter pruning, but because I only have a 1/4 acre and because I was young and overeager when I started this garden, I probably put in too many trees. It's too much for our family. I've talked in the past about how I used to have 5 quince trees and I've taken out 3 of them. Why would a family of 6 need 5 quince trees? But I was excited. I liked collecting varieties. I liked trying things. But after a while, I realized it just doesn't all fit, even with a lot of intentional pruning. So this is a good time to walk around and see, where are my paths? Where am I fitting? And are things getting overcrowded? Are trees being, not bullies, but are they just doing too well and taking up too much space and choking out other things, other shrubs, other trees? Are they consuming the path? So that gives me some long-term strategic planning when I think about whether I need to buy another fruit tree. Right now, what I'm thinking about is, what fruit trees do I need to be taking out? I also think about undone projects because I have a lot of them. My outdoor kitchen is not finished. So I think about my long-term strategizing as I'm walking the garden this time of year, like, okay, what is realistic for me to get done during the dry season? When it doesn't rain, July, August, and September, what can I realistically crank out of my unfinished projects? So my rain garden is an area where I also do a May assessment, because this is an area that I constantly cram in more perennials every year. It used to have big gaps in it that were just kind of mulch, not much else. And as time and budget have allowed, I have filled in with more and more perennials. I can't wait to show you at the height of summer. It's going to be very lush this year. But I just want to take an assessment of what's doing well and what's not, because down on this side of the rain garden, I have things that love moisture, and up on the back end are things that do well with dry sun. And I just want to observe when it rains, how the water is flowing, whether my systems are working well, whether my planting is working well here in the rain garden. So I just want to do kind of an annual checkup, because in the middle of winter, I can't do it. All the plants here are dormant, and this is just full of water a lot when it's rainy out. So now is the time the plants are starting to come up. Obviously, like Echinacea and Rudbeckia and Blue False Indigo and things like that are still quite small, and they'll get a lot taller, but they're up, so I can see where they are and how they're doing. Okie doke, I'm back. We're starting to lose some of the light here. That's okay, I'll wrap up real quick. I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into kind of how I do some of my garden planning, and also how I utilize times in the garden that feel like dead space or feel like downtime. It doesn't mean those times need to be harnessed to their fullest extent. It doesn't mean that I need to find a way to exhaust myself in those spaces, but I can still use them. They're still productive, useful spaces. They can be restful and productive at the same time. So take this time here in early May, when we are between cycles of busyness and productivity, and spend some energy observing, some time observing and thinking about where you can push your system, where you want to take it, where you are content, where you want to make some changes, and use what is happening in your garden, the elements that are at play in your garden, and how you can see them really beginning to pop up and really beginning to take shape in your garden, and think about how you can move your garden and push it and plan from there. So I'm gonna head into the house, I think, and maybe do some Mad Libs with my kids. My boys are really into Mad Libs right now. And if you get a chance, check out my Patreon, check out the links in the description to how you can support this channel, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks.